tablespoon of butter. And then, see this, I have one onion, I guess about a medium size that I chopped up. That's what's gonna go in that butter. This is for the ground lamb that goes in between the 2 layers of kibbe. So that's why you can do it the day before. Just refrigerate that, get out of the fridge, you know, an hour or so before you're going to make the kibbe, so it's not as difficult. So I let the butter get a little too brown, but like I said, it doesn't matter. There's a few little differences. Okay, so I'm sauteing these onions for a couple of minutes. I feel like you want to stir this periodically. And when there's no more red, you're done. It's done, and then so you go, normally, like I say, I would have done this the day before, so you don't have to keep alternating what you're doing, you know? But I wanted you to see it. Okay, now, there's of course some fat in here, because this is not kibbe, it's just ground lamb. So, I'm gonna drain the fat. And this would be the same lamb you use for nezele. It's all just ground lamb, except for kibbe. That's a teaspoon each of salt and allspice per pound. So this was 1 pound. And all this meat won't be used in the kibbe, because you only put a little bit. And so then you freeze it. Once it's cooked, you can freeze it again. And use it for nezele. There's other dishes too, which I've never made because not everybody likes the vegetables, but you can use ground lamb and you can have it with mushrooms, with green beans. Green beans calls for a little tomato sauce. The mushrooms are in a lemon, you know, just the juice from the meat and lemon, celery. So if you have leftover, you can always use it for that, and then you serve that over rice or nezele, so it never goes to waste. Those Bedouins, they couldn't waste anything. They had no refrigerators. I don't know how they did it. Okay, so that's the end of that process. This is more onion, about 1.5 of a good size, that I just cut in chunks. And this is for 3 pounds of kibbe meat. So you could use 2 medium onions, say, whatever, but just judge the size of about how, it's a lot of onion. So, you gotta have a food processor because this is gonna be turned into white foam. What you want is not to see, you know, any onion. You wanna see like a white, fluffy foam kind of thing. And so when you put it in the kibbe, you're not tasting chunks of onion, but it's all dispersed in the middle. Don't ask me how they did this, the old Syrians without food processors. I have no clue. You see how it's all just white fluffy stuff. Yeah. If you go to the butcher, and you probably have to buy a leg of lamb. You come take a look at the color of this meat. You see how red it is compared to regular ground lamb? Yes. Because you tell him, take it off the bone, remove all the fat. Now, they can never get all the fat, but they do a darn good job. Because if there's fat in there, it's going to shrink and it's going to taste different. Remove all the fat and then put it through a grinder twice. For ground beef or lamb, they only put it through once. You want it twice because it has to be very, very soft. I'm going to put in here, since it's 3 pounds, I need 3 teaspoons, which is a tablespoon, so approximately. No, it's allspice, but the ones in the cans, I don't know how long they've been in there. I just always bought it. I'll show you. It's ground allspice, so I just feel that stuff gets used more at those Middle Eastern stores, and it's fresher. Okay, so we put the spices in there. Now I'm going to toss this mush in here. Whoops. I need this. Get all as much out of it as I can. So you see, when I'm done, come take a look. It's quite a bit of onion, but you won't see it in the meat. This needs to go in there. All right, next step. We're going to measure out the wheat. And we have to soak it in warm water for 30 minutes. So that's what I mean, that there's a lot of steps to this. To make kibbe, in case you're not making 3 pounds at a time, which is a lot, you need 3/4 of a cup of wheat, which is this. It's called bulgur, and you have to get the #1 fine one. They come in all different courses. This is the finest. So 3/4 of a cup for a pound. I'm doing 3 pounds. That's 2 1/4 cups. So 2 1/4 cups of wheat. Pour it into a bowl. And that's for 3 pounds of lamb, because it's 3/4 of a cup each. You can see I don't like scrape off the top. I get close enough. That's 2 1/4. And I like maintaining history and tradition. I like thinking of my parents, my grandparents every time I do this and thanking them for the gift of this. Okay, I'm going to fill this up with warm water. It soaks and gets soft. And then the hardest part of kibbe is squeezing out the water from this wheat. But I use a ricer, which also, thank you Aunt Maddie, she's the one, I never even heard of a ricer. And I've never used it for anything but squeezing this and squeezing spinach to make the spinach pies, because you have to get rid of all the water. Okay. So, 30 minutes. I'm going to put the timer on. All right, these are my kibbe pans. Now, last because the meat is crispy. A little bit of butter. What we're going to do is put melted butter and a touch of oil in the bottom of the pans, and then I'll refrigerate them so that that's all hardened when we cook it. So this is about a little over a tablespoon of butter. Should be enough. Before I was married, I used to cook with my mother, but I was only 19 when I got married, so I didn't cook that many years. But I was blessed to live near her. And so I learned again from her till I could do it on my own. But we used to like to cook together. It was fun. Spend the time, you know? Yeah. And in the days before microwaves, we had to put it in a pan. Okay, so I'm going to pour some of it in here and some of it in here. And then add just a touch of oil so that the butter doesn't burn. Anytime you're sauteing something with butter, always add just a, half a teaspoon or a teaspoon of oil. And that will prevent the butter from burning, which is nice. Okay, now I'm going to spread it around to cover the bottom. And you don't want to put too much or you'll find that, your kibbe's mushed in it and mushing it around comes up the side. So that looks like pretty good. Probably could have done with a little bit less, but it's not bad. Okay. I'm going to spread it and then I'm going to go put it in the, let me see if I have room in this fridge. Just so that, because when you use kibbe meat, we have to keep dunking our fingers in ice water to stay very cold. Don't ask me why. Just all of these things my mother taught me. So, I'm assuming she wasn't just making me do extra work. This is, I think this would fit on top. Yes, okay. Very good. I think I'll refrigerate the meat too, because I don't want it sitting bowl is the 3 pounds of lamb meat, 3 teaspoons of salt, 3 teaspoons of allspice, and a bunch of onion put through the food processor, and it's now just mush. So here's the wheat that's been soaking for 30 minutes in warm water. Putting it in the ricer, and then you use all the force you have. And I turn it over so the top goes. Keep pushing till there's almost nothing coming out. And this will separate all the water from the wheat. Okay. And then you put this in here. So this is for 3 pounds of meat, 2 1/4 cups of wheat. And once I've gotten, a good half of it out, now before I lift more out of there, I'm going to pour off the water on top so I can see what I have left. Okay, so now I'm going to just pour off the top of the water so I can see it better. Since it's been sitting. And when it sits, then the wheat all goes to the bottom. And you'll lose a little bit when you do this, but there's more than enough. Good enough. So you can see there's like a little bit left, that's fine. Syrian food isn't hard to make, but it's always a process. It's not quick, but it's not really hard. Okay, now, here's the hardest part. I'm gonna keep working this until you don't see the wheat anymore. I probably should have used a bigger bowl. I have a bigger bowl, I didn't think of it, so it's gonna get a little messy, it's all right. And by now our trays are hardened, so then I can place them in the tray.
So did your dad's mom come right from Syria, or is he?
Yes, my father's mother came, I believe it was 1902. She was 2 years old. They had one other baby. I always thought it was Aunt Margaret, but I don't think so. Might have been Aunt Celia, who was an infant. Because there were 8 of them altogether. They had the other 6 here in the United States. So they were born citizens. They had 4 girls and then 4 boys. Can you see how the color is changing? See? The wheat is disappearing. So they had 8 children. And some of my father's uncles were only 4, 5, 6 years older than him because they had 8. And his mother was the firstborn, so. But she married, now my grandfather, he came here a little bit older. I think he was maybe a young teenager when his family came. And her family was in Massachusetts. And my grandfather's family was in New York. And, but they knew, the communities, they knew people. So my grandmother met him, I guess when he was in Massachusetts, or possibly they had come to New York to see other relatives, I don't know. But she was the only one of the 7 who married someone who didn't live in Massachusetts. Everybody else was up there, I had 18 great aunts and uncles. They were all in Massachusetts. So I spent a lot of time there with them. And tons of cousins. It was nice. And they all cook Syrian. All of them. Thank God we all loved it too. Had I used a bigger bowl, Laura, it would be easier. This made it hard. I have to remember to use a bigger bowl. You don't want it up to the top. You have to stir it and mix it in. but it's almost done. All right. All right. Now, here's a little aside. There's something called Kibbe, which is raw. You mix this, and then you make a big patty out of it, and you refrigerate it. You have to eat it the same day. It's very delicious. Dan and I love it. It looks like you don't see the wheat.
Right.
So you never bite into an onion. Although you do, the center layer has it, the other one that I made, but it's so cooked that it's soft. You know, you cook it in there, then it bakes in the meat and gets even softer. Okay, now, time to check the trays. Water. Nice in here. You keep your hands wet. You want to keep the meat moist.
Okay.
I make it very thin. Very, very thin. So I pick up a little glob and I start spreading it out in my hand. Okay, whoops, so thin it fell apart. Now, I put it in here and you press it down. You see how thin it is? See? See, maybe a 1/4 inch. Okay. So you get it as thin as you can like this. And you put it here. And you press it some more. There's a little space there, so I'm going to fill in here. Okay. There's always going to be little spaces. And of course you try to keep it an even thickness as best you can. And the more you press, you see how the lines disappear. And you can feel it when you do this, that it's pretty even. That's why I don't use gloves with Kibbe, because I want to feel it. But we'll have to go to that butcher one day and see. Now the butchers are always more expensive, but they do have the best quality things. So, okay. Now see, that one's thicker, so I'm gonna push it around a bit. Combine them. See how fast it goes?
Yeah.
And of course I'm gonna do this shape, so I'm making it, you know, something that will fit in there. It doesn't all have to be a huge, huge thing. The space. Now I'm just feeling it. Now just dip your fingers in here, and when you know, like join it together this way, so that there's not going to be any lines. It just makes it cut better and stay together. Now you see what I'm doing? I'm not making a full thick layer. I'm just spreading it, because if it's too thick, it's going to come apart after it's cooked and you cut it. So you just want to, okay, then we're going to push it down. Okay, now last thing, which I almost forgot, pine nuts. Once again, I'm just sprinkling some on. Okay. All right. Now you just press down a little bit. This one is harder because you can't spread it so easily. And it'll be a little bit thicker than the bottom layer because of that. So you make it as thin as you can get it, you see? And then you lay it down. And you have a little more filling in. So you push it around a little bit, if you can, because you don't want to upset the bottom layer. So you can see, it's still pretty thin. You want it thin. You don't want to put a 1/2 inch thick meat in there. And like I said, you'll have more filling in with this second layer, like I have to fill in there. You just pat it a little bit so it moves a little bit, but you can't spread it like you can the first layer. All right. Good. I only, we eat it when the family is here, And I like to think, with the Native Americans, they were so respectful of the animals that they killed to live. They couldn't live without life, but they prayed over them. They respected them. They appreciated them. And I just try to always appreciate everything. Okay. See, I'm kind of fitting this one in at an angle. And you can see that the bottom layer moves slightly when you do this, but it's okay. You're not dragging it down. Almost done here, honey, see? There's that last little bit. And then we're going to refrigerate this tray to keep it cold while I make the other tray. And then that's it. Oh, we're gonna have, I did good. We're gonna have more left because the other tray is even smaller. And now I'm just putting a little bit of water, seal up all the seams. The first cut is approximately down the middle. It's never perfect. It's never perfectly straight, and the sides are never exactly the same, but close enough. So now let's see how many cuts I can do here. 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. All right, I'm gonna do, that means my oven's ready. Now you cut, I'll make 5 slices on each side. You run the knife into the water in between so that it doesn't stick to the meat. These are all the little, hints that maybe are not in recipes, but when you learn from someone, then you learn these things. And if it wasn't pressed down enough, it wouldn't stay together. You can see these two are much bigger because I'm not good with this. I just do the best I can. Whoops. It's okay. And I'll show you before I get it in there how you slice it when it's cooked. If you're going to freeze that, you have to let it cool before you put it in the freezer. Otherwise, all the moisture will, it'll get moist and then it will get not too good. So some are not exactly. Okay. Now, you start from this end here, and I'm going to bring it down to here on a diagonal. As best I can. Then you do the next line. And you can see some diamonds are bigger than others because my lines are not exactly perfect. But if you want it perfect, put a ruler there and that will do it. I've just never bothered. And I don't have a great eye for these things, so it's close enough. Tastes the same. And That's how it works. You finish right at the end, flip it, because it's easier to do the same line next to this one. Now we're gonna make kibbe balls and put them on top of it. And then when it's baking, and the butter is melting, since I do 2 trays, I'll switch them halfway through so that they're not all on the same height in the oven the entire time. And I'll turn the balls over so that the place they were at will get more browned. It's very easy. Just time consuming. Kibbe balls, you ready? What do we got here? Make them about this big. Make a ball, you know, like a football kind of thing. And then you flatten out as much as you can so that you have a little well. Then you take some of this and 3 or 4 pine nuts, and you fold up the side, bring in the ends, press gently to seal it. And voila, you have it. That's one. And you can make any size you like. You know, it doesn't really matter. You want to try to make them as uniform as possible so they cook uniformly. Now this meat I will freeze and use for Nestle or something else from the center layer, the cooked ground lamb. Can always be used. You can use it to make hashway, but that you need a lot of cooked ground lamb, so. Okay. See, I'm just trying to close it all up. Right? Wow. See, one's going to be smaller. These are a little smaller, but that's okay. That's a lot. I'd rather make them a little smaller than make a giant one, which won't cook in the same way, you know. You just put a little. Okay. And you work it till you get it all covered. It's pretty easy to handle. Now, what I could have done was make the balls first and try to make them more uniform. I didn't, but you could do that instead of having, you know, 2 smaller than the others. When I'm cooking them, I'll take these all out first before you know what I mean? They look done to me. I'll remove them because they're smaller. Okay, now the butter. This size tray, I use a stick of butter and another pat from another one because the other tray is smaller. You cut them in, you know, that kind of size, whatever. Spread it around. And then while it's cooking, like I'll roll this so that that part will cook, you know what I mean? It cook for a while, then you roll it out of the way. You don't always get the balls out of it, but it's very hard to use up all the meat exactly in the trays. You know,
right.
This looks good. So put one more here, and then the rest is for the other tray. Now when you bake it, I check it every 20 minutes. 350. And because I use 2 shelves, I alter, you know, move them to the opposite shelves. Oh, okay. All right, first one's going in. These are the heights for the trays. So I'll put one right in the center. and then the second one I'll put up top, and every 20 minutes I'll change the trays. This has been, of course, I'm cooking 2 trays. See, I moved the balls to the corners, which were browner. Yeah, okay, so I want you to see, it's browned, but it's not overly browned because I bake it, I freeze it when it's cold, and I reheat it, so I don't want to overcook it. So now, you see the butter? Okay, that's all going to be absorbed now as it sits. So by the time it's cool and you slice it, there won't be any liquid at all. Just so, okay, Chris. This one, I'm going to leave another, we'll start with 5 minutes at a time.